Hello, happy Saturday. So I recently posted a picture of my son's room in comparison with my daughter's room. And I got quite a few comments, questions, and reactions to this. And I always think it's really funny how kind of the simpler everyday things that I share are the ones that get like this overwhelming reaction or response. And I think it's because, we are all going through these things and it creates a lot of uncertainty in us when we don't know how other people are doing it. And so that's why I want to share, because I want to normalize the chaos of sometimes living with second plane children. So as you saw with my daughter, she is, hi Julia, hi guys. As you saw with my daughter, she's 6, so she's entering the second plane, but she is very driven towards needing external order. She loves to clean and organize and keep her room in great shape. Meanwhile, my son, who's 9, is a complete opposite. He lives in his head, and his room is just like a carpet of Legos and books, and it's very much a reflection of him, right? Like, he likes to multitask. He loves to be listening to an audiobook while playing with Legos, and so his room is his space. Hi guys, thanks for joining. And so a lot of questions came up that I wanted to answer today with respect to how I approach my children's rooms and the boundaries around them. And so I want to start out by saying that, I don't write the rules. I am not like the be all end all of how you should live with your children. This is just my experience. And it really has a lot to do with how you were raised, what is important to you, your relationship with your children. Okay, I think I'm back. Okay, as I was saying, if our children have their own room, or even if they have their own space, if they share their room, we have to let them have their own boundaries, right? Because they need to experience setting and holding boundaries in their home, so that they can then do it when they are older. And we need to respect the fact that they are people and they have boundaries, right? And so the bedroom or their living space becomes a great place to help them practice setting those boundaries and modeling how to respect boundaries while also keeping in mind family boundaries. So one of the questions that came up was, how do we know we're being effective as parents if our children's behaviors don't reflect what we would want them to be, right? Maybe we want them to have a really tidy room, and they have a super messy room. And so does that mean that we're not being effective as parents? And how do we know when we're being effective? So this is a really slippery slope, because if we try to tie in our effectiveness as parents to our children's behaviors, then we are walking from a place of ego, right? We're saying that our children are a reflection of ourselves. And that is not the case. So Dr. Montessori always wrote that parents are children's guardians, not their makers. Okay, so what we do or don't do is not really a reflection of who they are or what they're going to become. And when we can take that pressure off of our shoulders, then we are in a much better place to connect with them as who they are and not who we want them to be because of what it says about us. Does that make sense? And it's really hard to do because we're so tied in with their success. But it's also really important to just kind of keep this in your awareness. Okay. So how do we know that we're being effective as parents? Well, it's more about how we are behaving. Are we maintaining our composure when we get triggered? Are we identifying our conditioning? Are we able to take a break and say, hey, this is really triggering me. Let me go work through this and I'll be back. That's how we can show that we are effective as parents. What your child does or doesn't do, how he behaves or doesn't behave, is not a reflection of you as a parent. And as a matter of fact, the verb parenting, to parent, didn't really exist. It wasn't really used until the 70s or 80s, okay? Before that, children were raised. Parents raised children. Parents reared children. They didn't parent them, right? And so, hi, Amrita. And so let's get back to this idea of we are guiding them, right? We're not making them. We're not. They're on their own path. We can only work on ourselves. And the more you work on yourself, the more you're modeling and the more that you are leaving space for them to work on themselves. Okay. The second question that came up was, how do you maintain your cool when there is so much chaos? Yes, new Montessori mom, you're so right. We have started micromanaging them so much. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And I won't go into it because it's this whole anthropological explanation, but it is very true. And we can talk about that later because it's a whole other dive. But how do we maintain our cool when our children are not behaving in a way that we expect them to? Well, I think again, right? We go inside and are like, why are we getting triggered? Why is this bothering us so much? So for example, with my son's messy room, does it bother me? Yes, it does bother me, right? It bothers me because I would love to see it all nice and neat and organized. I know that it's easier for him to find his stuff if it's all nice and neat and organized. But this is the boundary that he is setting, right? This is his space to learn to live in. And when I was little, when I was his age, I was also very messy. And let me tell you why I was really messy. Partly it was because my mom was always on my case about keeping my room clean. And so this second plane need for independence of thought, for creating your own rules, right? I remember as a child, it led me to then be like, well, no, now I'm just going to keep my room really messy, right? because it's my room and now I'm going to express myself the way. So the more that we can just say like, hey, let the child reflect, right, on the room. It's like, hey, how are you feeling about your room? Are you having a hard time finding your Legos? Sometimes the room can get overwhelmingly messy for the child and they don't know where to even start cleaning it up, especially if you have like a big picture thinker like my son. They just see a giant mess and they don't know where to start. And so what I do with him is about maybe once a month, sometimes once every couple of months, is just go in and say, hey, how are you feeling about your room? Do you need some support in getting it a little tidied up? For example, if he's starting a new robotics project, that is always a good time to go in and be like, oh, you're starting something new. Let me help you get it tidied up, right? So it's not a finger pointing. Now you've got to, clean up your room or else. It's acknowledging that they're 7, 8, 9 years old, right? If we get overwhelmed, gosh, imagine them. So working together, breaking it down for them and saying, okay, I see, let's see what we see, right? We see books, we see dirty clothes, we see clean clothes, we see Legos. Okay, let's pick one. And so your child might pick books and then you can kind of direct. You don't have to do it for them, but you can direct and you can say, okay, how about we put the paperback books in this shelf and the hardcover books on this shelf, or your comics over here and your drawing books over here. And helping them focus gives them the executive function skills that they need. It gives you the reassurance that, okay, things are getting done. And it helps them know that they're not alone, right? That you're together in this endeavor. And so that helps me to maintain my cool, because I feel that, I'm kind of empowering him. There's teamwork. But like I said earlier, we also have to respect the fact that it is their environment. It is their boundary, the boundary that they're setting, that we need to respect. And they might not communicate their boundary in a way that we can hear, because again, they're 6, 7, 8, right? They're not going to say, Mommy, my boundary is that I would like to keep my room in this perpetual mess, because this is how I express myself, or this is how I feel comfortable. That's not what they're going to say, but we have to interpret that, right? We have to help voice that, like, oh, it looks like you're really comfortable with your room the way it is, and you would like me to respect that. And then you can share your own limits. For example, in my home, yes, the room can be messy, but it cannot be dirty. So food cannot be in the room. And yes, sometimes it does sneak up to the room. And so I look for, wrappers and stuff like that. So the room cannot be dirty. And there's a reason, right? There's like a logical reason for that. And so you have to talk about that. And then we do vacuum every couple of weeks. And it, that can look like, realistically, that can look like him shoving Legos to the sides so that we can vacuum. And he does most of the vacuuming, but I do supervise, right? And again, there's a reason for the vacuuming, because we don't want the dust to gather and the allergies and all that. So respecting their boundaries, helping them voice their boundaries, and then sharing your family's boundaries. So let me see, there's a question. How do we navigate this in a shared space with 2 siblings sharing a room? Do we let them figure it out amongst themselves? I'm really glad that you asked this question, because what your role could be in that situation is helping them to brainstorm solutions. Right? And in positive discipline, there is a whole series of steps for solving problems like this, where it is 2 people figuring out how to collaborate. But basically, you need to help them figure out what the actual problem is. And sometimes the problem is not necessarily what it looks like, but you can kind of talk about the problem for a while until you come up with a statement of what the problem actually is. And then once you do, then you can invite them to brainstorm a bunch of different solutions. They can be really crazy, harebrained solutions, very logical, reasonable solutions, a big list of solutions. Nobody gets to say that's a dumb idea, that's not going to work. You just write down a bunch of solutions. When everybody has exhausted their solutions, and you can share a couple of solutions, but don't take over because it's their problem, but you can share a couple of solutions as an adult. When they're done with brainstorming, then they can go through and cancel out any solution that they proposed that is not reasonable, realistic, or related to the problem. Right? And also if it's not respectful. So those are the 4 R's: reasonable, realistic, related, and respectful. Respectful to the other person, respectful to both people. So they cancel out any of those, and then it leaves them with maybe 2 if you're lucky, and then they choose, and then they try it out for 7 days. And your job is to help hold that boundary, right? This new rule that they put in place. And your job is to help them reassess 7 days later and say, we're going to try this for 7 days, and then we'll come back together and see how it works. So it's a lot longer, more involved than you deciding, well, this is what we're going to do. but you're teaching them a lot of skills, and you're empowering them to come up with a solution. So try that and see how it works. And then I got another question that said, do you allow the mess because it benefits them? Or do you encourage order because it's helpful in his life? And what came up for me, like when I was thinking about this question, he has a lot of opportunities to experience the benefits of order in his life and to practice order. And that's why, children live in a community, right? They live with their parents, they go to classes or workshops or their grandparents' house or their neighbor's house. So they have lots of opportunities to practice order. Their room is their place where they can kind of exhale. And so, for example, with my son, there's order in homeschooling, there's order in all of the work that he does around the house. There's order in the classes that he goes to in 4-H, in visiting the neighbors. So look at how many areas your child has in their life to experience order, and then, kind of counter that with the space that he has to express himself, or that they have to express themselves. So those are just, some of my thoughts around messy rooms. And there was one more thing that I wanted to share before I go. About a year ago during lockdown, my daughter's room got incredibly messy. I mean, it was like a bomb exploded. There's actually a picture of it on my grid. It was just absolutely nuts. And so what I did was, I asked her, like, hey, are you comfortable with your room, or would you like some help cleaning it up? And she was just kind of like, oh, thank goodness. Somebody's here to help me, right? And I could just see like the relief in her face. And so I said, look, if I go in and I help you to clean, then we're going to get rid of some of the things in your room that maybe you're not using and that are causing a lot of clutter. Are you okay with that? And she said yes, right? And so again, I asked permission to go into her room. I didn't just barge in and start throwing things away. I asked permission and I explained what was causing the problem, or what was one cause of the problem. And so, we did just that. We got rid of a bunch of stuff that she wasn't using that had snuck its way inside her room, because she's a lover of like little things. And so she had a lot of little things in her room. And so if you have a child like that, they might need help, right? And again, they're not going to come to you and ask for help because they don't even know what the problem is. They just know that they're overwhelmed. So once I did that, her room was just so much calmer and much more minimalistic. And what's been amazing to see is that she has been able to maintain her room clean on her own for a year now. And I've always been really careful to make sure that new little things don't sneak into her room. So if your child is amenable to you coming in and helping, that could be a huge transformation, a huge shift, because once they experience a clean room, then they're so much more likely to keep it that way. And if they're not, again, it's their room, it's their space. And we do need to respect it, keeping in mind our family's boundaries. And if it's really triggering you, take some time and think about why. Why is it? What is it about your upbringing that is triggering you? What is it about your perspective on how somebody should live their life that is really triggering you? And then work on that first, right? Work on yourself first. And once you've moved past those big emotions and figure out where they're coming from, you might find yourself taking another look at your child's room and realizing that it's really not as bad as you thought it was, because it's no longer triggering you. So with those thoughts out there in the world, I am going to leave you. I'd love to hear in the comments if anything resonated, or if you have any other questions. I'd always love reading about your own experiences with your children, because they not only help me, but they help others, and they help normalize this crazy parenthood journey that we're all in. And I always get feedback saying like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for talking about this, because other people started talking about it and now I don't feel alone. And so that's my goal always, is to help you know that you are not alone in this, that we're all going through this. And there are 100 different ways of walking with our children and of walking alongside each other. Thank you so much, new Montessori mom. I always appreciate you watching and commenting. I love our conversations. So let's keep it going. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care of yourselves, guys. Bye.